Hi, everybody. Mr. Wallowitz here. Now that the Civil War is over, there were some major questions that still face the country about how to deal with the former Confederate states. Some of those questions include how should the South be rebuilt? Should those who fought against the United States be punished? And what were some major challenges that the former slaves faced? All this we will touch upon in our presentation of Radical Reconstruction. This photograph was taken in April 1865 in Richmond, Virginia, the capital of the Confederate States. It shows the destruction of a building and was typical of destruction of major cities in many of the southern states, in the Confederate States of America. It's good to think about uh, what were some things that people living in the setting did in the years following this photograph. Obviously, one of them would be the literal reconstruction of buildings and cities, but there's other types of reconstruction that we are going to discuss throughout this presentation. The Civil War, 1861 to 1865. The American Civil War was fought between the United States and the Confederate States of America from 1861 to 1865. Disagreements about slavery were a central source of the increasing political unrest and disunity in the country that led to the war. These disagreements largely followed sectional lines. Many white Southerners, both slaveholding and not, supported slavery, while many Northerners opposed slavery. The United States defeated the Confederate States of America. Reconstruction Era, 1865 to 1877. Reconstruction refers to the period following the Civil War between 1865 and 1877. John Wilkes Booth, a Confederate sympathizer, assassinated President Lincoln 5 days after the Supreme Commander of the Confederate Army surrendered. As Lincoln's vice president, Andrew Johnson became president. Johnson was a Southern Democrat who opposed secession of the Confederacy, but, compared to Northern Republicans, was relatively sympathetic to Southern states. Many people in Congress opposed Johnson. His biggest opponents were called radical Republicans. Radical means extreme, and radicals typically want to see extreme changes in society. In the 1860s, the radical Republicans wanted to punish the South for the Civil War and supported equal white rights for freedmen. Major questions after the Civil War. So the next few slides, we're going to see some questions that were posed to the United States after the Civil War. You are to respond to these questions and how you think things should be on the Google Doc that is attached to this post. Some of the major questions following the Civil War included: how should the South be rebuilt? How should the states that seceded be brought back into the Union? And how should former slaves be incorporated into a country as freed men and women? Reconstructing a nation. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers died during the Civil War. A recent study suggests the total number of deaths was 750,000. At the start of the Civil War, there were nearly 4 million slaves in the United States. So after 4 years of war and over 200 years of slavery, could Northerners and Southerners rebuild the South together? Could they unify as citizens of the same country? Punishment for the Confederate States? Other questions were raised about what consequences would be for the Confederate States. Should people who fought against the United States be recognized as citizens? And should they be punished? What should be done to the southern state governments that fought against the United States? African Americans in the South. Just before the Civil War, there were about 4 million enslaved people in the United States. For over 200 years, black people in America had been systematically dehumanized. As slaves, they were considered property and, as such, had no legal rights. And in 1857, the Supreme Court ruled in the Dred Scott case that all African Americans, whether enslaved or free, could not be citizens. During the Civil War, African Americans provided critical support to the Union's fight, acting as spies, cooks, soldiers, and launderers for the Army. Black soldiers made up 10% of the Union Army, half of whom were free Northerners and half of whom were Southerners who escaped to Union lines. They were often assigned the hardest, most dangerous work and usually suffered far worse than white soldiers when taken prisoner by the Confederate Army. So, how would free men and women be treated in the Southern states? How would Northerners address the issue of including former slaves as citizens in society? And what were some major challenges that former slaves faced? In class, we are going to investigate this question. Why was the radical Reconstruction plan for Reconstruction considered radical?